Well, coming up on today's show, why now might be the time to buy yourself a used EV. More details on the Kia Soul EV, which has been spotted with less camo, and Jaguar I-Pace deliveries are underway. Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. Hello and welcome to the Monday, the 10th of September edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transport. I know I was back yesterday, but it was a bit of a kind of get home, unpack, record a podcast kind of day. It was lovely today just to be back in the UK, back into the routine, back looking for EV stories for you and going through as many as I could find. And I must have only used about half of the stories that I found filling up today's podcast. It was so good to be back in the routine of finding those stories, saving you time, trying to filter out the stuff that you really need to know, trying to find that kind of unbiased viewpoint somewhere in the middle of being an EV fan, but without being ridiculous about the whole fanboy thing. And I just love it. Just love being back. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. And if you are a Patreon supporter helping to make this show, thank you as well to myev.com. And we'll be talking about them in one of the stories today. They do help me make this show, and they've built the world's first marketplace, which is specifically, uniquely for electric vehicles only. Totally free to buy and sell, and learn about EVs on there as well. As you may know, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, and if you're new, by the way, I figure that every day there must be somebody new finding the podcast. I can see the stats are going up. Hello, welcome, there's room for you. The rest of us have bunched up. If you're a long-time listener, you'll know that I had the first week off I've had this year. The first holiday we've taken all year was a week in Norway to go and look at EV adoption over there, the world's biggest marketplace per capita for electric cars. And got on a boat here in the UK, somewhere called Southampton, in, funnily enough, the south of England, and took about 2 days to sail round to Bergen in Norway, which was our first stop. Now, Bergen is a beautiful, beautiful place, by the way. Look, all of Norway is just utterly stunning. So we sailed from Southampton up the North Sea, and then Bergen is a fair way up Norway. I wouldn't say it's probably still in the south of the country. It's a bit higher. If you look on the kind of latitude across, you've got Oslo, the capital, but that's way over to the east. Bergen is a coastal place. I suppose it kind of had to be because we were sailing quite a big boat into Bergen. Down one of the, is it technically down a fjord or not? It's kind of a long way into the country. But anyway, by 2 days of sailing, ended up in Bergen, and finally nice to get off and actually get my feet back on dry land and not be bobbing around, which was quite nice after a couple of days. And my first experience of Norway as well, just wonderful. The food is great, the people are fantastic, the fish market, holy moly, was amazing, but we were there to really look out for EVs. I would say what I should have done in hindsight is keep, and this is really nerdy, right? I should have kept some sort of scorecard, some sort of EV bingo of how many I saw in the day. What I did do was see how many EVs I could find in the first 10 minutes. So we stepped off the boat and onto shore, and then I set my stopwatch. And I'm going to make a YouTube video for that one, so I won't spoil it on here, but I took a picture. Every time I saw an EV, I took a picture, and I stopped the stopwatch after 10 minutes. I'll do that YouTube video in a couple of days when I get time to put it together, but it was super interesting. Like I say, no spoilers. Did notice, I would say if I had to rank it, Nissan Leafs, original sort of versions 1 and 2 / just version 1 if you like, easily the most popular. Leafs everywhere, loads of Leafs, and quite a few new Leafs as well. Lots of commercial vehicles in terms of things like the Nissan vans as well. One Tesla taxi I saw in the first 10 minutes of driving past, and this was literally me walking off the boat and heading to the fish market, kind of being in the centre of a lot of traffic, and just looking around, not looking out for them, not going to charge points and things, just standing on the side of the road and soaking up being in a new country. Tesla taxi in the first 10 minutes. It was a Model X, which is a very nice way to travel if you are getting a cab. I think if I had to rank them, Leafs first, BMW i3s second. Oh yes, i3s everywhere in Bergen, in Norway. And then probably a combination of Tesla's, Model X's, Model S's, by the way. But loads, tons. It was just fascinating to see and hear how quiet all of the cars were driving past. So the first thing we did after my silly little 10-minute test of how many EVs you can see in 10 minutes when you get off a boat. We walked, did a bit of a kind of a lap, if you like, of the busiest bits that we can find around the university area, around the shopping centre area, the markets, some really beautiful kind of parks and things like that, and just really nice, and everything, of course, enhanced by seeing every other car, okay, maybe it wasn't every other car, being an EV. And as I mentioned on yesterday's podcast as well, it quickly became very normal, by the way. And in fact, what disturbed the peace was when a diesel bus or a lorry would go past, you would notice the noise and the smell, and after a while, what became normal was the peace and quiet and EVs flying around everywhere, and just the air being fresh and clean. It was a wonderful place to go to, and it was day 3 of a week-long holiday. Like I say, the first 2 days were at sea, but then we walked around, and if you know the area at all, if you're a Norwegian listener, we walked back up to the end of the kind of peninsula where the boats come into the aquarium, which was beautiful. We walked all around the fish markets and the main, is it called Bergen? The main, that kind of area where all the shops are, or Bergen, Stollen, Bergenhus, those kind of places. It was just wonderful, and it was our first experience of seeing so many EVs in Norway, so many in car parks as well. Literally, our boat docked, and we stepped off, and in the very first 3 cars we saw as we were walking down the gangplank. It's not, it's metal. And then there was a little minibus meeting us at the end. So, but the very first 3 cars that we saw in the car park of the docks were an original Leaf, a brand new Leaf, and a Zoe. And it's like, they were the first 3 cars I saw in a brand new country, not the first 3 EVs, genuinely the first 3 cars that we saw. And then being at the docks and the ports and all that kind of stuff, we saw a bunch of car carriers of just new cars being delivered on the back of car transporters. And I got a bunch of pictures. I'll put them all, I'll make a little YouTube slideshow video so you can see. Just covered in EVs, and so many e-Golfs as well, which, again, it's a pretty rare sighting here in the UK. So it was the biggest place that we were going to go to in Norway. We weren't going to the capital, Oslo. We were staying very, very coastal. We did go quite a long way inland, down to along one of the fjords, but I'll talk about that on tomorrow's podcast. But that first experience of Norway, not only a lot of EVs, but also the breadth of them, and just how quickly you get used to seeing them, and how much it just becomes really horrible to see a stinky diesel driving past. More stories throughout the rest of the week. Well, the Arizona resident Steve Sasman is currently 42 states deep into a 48-state trek across the USA in his 2012 Tesla Model S, which has now done 170,000 miles, reports Business Insider. Well, he said this, and I quote from Steve, "Not only can you road trip, it's hands down the best road trip vehicle in the world. At most charging stops, the car is ready before you're done eating, using the restroom, or catching up on some work. You arrive feeling relaxed and refreshed, not fried and frazzled, especially if you use AutoPilot. The fact it costs nothing is an amazing bonus." Well, he's currently 10,000 miles into his cross-country, his 48-state trip, and all at no cost. Well, of course there is a cost, but to him there's no cost because he's grandfathered into free lifetime supercharging that Tesla offers. Not only has Steve already saved about $1,200 in gas on this trip that he's doing to raise awareness and publicity, but thanks to Tesla's camper mode now, he's also saved a load on lodging, about £1,200 as well. Dollars on the first 38 nights of the trip. Camper mode allows his Tesla to keep the AC or the heat on all night long, so he's been sleeping in comfort on his airbed in the back with the back seats folded down. 18 nights in the Tesla. Just 4 nights in hotels and Airbnb, 16 nights with friends and family. So 38 days on the road so far, and he spent $300. He's travelled for 38 days and spent $300. 42 states in, have a 48-state trek across the USA. He should be done very soon. I'll put a link to that story in the show notes. Well, Dominic, over at Inside EVs, has been asking a very pertinent question, which I thought was worth reporting on this show. Who among us can afford to buy a brand spanking new EV? You know, a $49,000 Tesla Model 3 or a $69,500 Jaguar I-Pace. Well, even a $38,000 Chevy Bolt. Yeah, not too many people putting their hands in the air. Good news, according to Consumer Reports, now is a great time to buy a used EV. And it's for various reasons, and things like demand being somewhat low, says Dominic, and the supply, which is fueled by those cars coming off the lease, which I've talked about on this show before, is relatively high, means, of course, lower prices. He does say the publication notes it doesn't necessarily apply to Teslas, which hold their value better. It's a good time, therefore, to check out our friends over at myev.com. That website, North America only at the moment. And I don't know if you do this too, when you go onto certain shopping websites. I love to rank things in order of most expensive and least expensive, because it's just fun. Is it just me? Is that just me? I love doing that. If I just look at myev.com right now, at the time of recording, the cheapest car for sale in America is a 2012 iMev, which is about $5,000. And then it's a 2012 Leaf. The most pricey, if I just change this to order by expensive, yes, this is a different league of used car. A 2017 Tesla Model X for $99,000. But still, someone has taken a big hit in the last 12 months, say, so that the car is a summer 2017 model that's a year old, and someone's taken a big hit on the depreciation. So even at $99,000, you are still getting a, I'm going to try and use the word bargain without being shouted at, because that's a lot of money. Well, I was talking yesterday about the Kia Niro and what sort of price it might come in at. Dr. Max Holland reminded me today that actually his Clean Technica article, which is really comprehensive, and it's a great look at the Niro EV and where it fits in the market, who might buy it, and how it compares to similar sized cars like the more premium I-Pace, is well worth looking at. And I would agree with him. In fact, I read this article when he put it online. I read it in bed when my wife was already fast asleep, and I was catching up on some EV stories, and she turned over and I kind of woke her up. I was fidgeting. She said, "What are you doing?" So I'm reading about a Kia Niro on Clean Technica. She rolled over and went back to sleep again. We're at that stage of our marriage, by the way. She just rolls her eyes and goes back to sleep. The article, I'll just read a little bit of Max's article, by the way. He says, "We know that the price of the Kia Niro in the domestic market of Korea is only very marginally higher than its smaller sibling, the Hyundai Kona. The premium for the larger sibling is only around $1,160. That's about €1,000, which is less than 3% differential, about 3% higher. Given what we know of Hyundai's existing price points in Europe, and assuming the Kia is similarly modest pricing bump, it's still going to put it around half the price of an I-Pace." Now, Max goes into all sorts of things about the efficiency of the Kia Niro EV in some depth as well, by the way. It's an article well worth reading in full. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, which if you're listening to us on any of those things like iTunes or any of the usual podcast places, even YouTube, those links should come through as URLs, and you just click on those and have a look at Clean Technica and then bounce right back to the podcast. Well, staying with Kia, though, the next generation Kia Soul EV has been spied again this week on the streets of Europe, minus, this time, though, the familiar black sheets and false body panels that made it look even more angular than it is. According to James Wong for Car Advice, while the body is still wrapped, it's now in one of those kind of tight, swirly black and white camouflage disguises, but it's a tight wrap, and so you get to see the shape, the silhouette a lot more. And you know what? The Soul isn't going to change that much. The Soul EV won't change drastically from the current model, he says. It should still appeal to all the current fans. Noticeable changes include some slim headlights up front, hockey stick-style tail lights extending towards the centre of the tailgate, contrasting with the current version's vertical motif. Well, yesterday I was talking about how the Kia Niro EV will share a lot of parts, and also from the sister brand Hyundai. How large will the Soul EV battery pack be? What will it be upgraded to? Well, the Kona and the Niro use two packs, 39 and 64 kilowatt hour packs. The last I heard being from different battery suppliers. Well, there was some confusion around that to do with the introduction of new cell chemistry. But anyway, so we'll wait and see what battery the new Kia Soul EV, which is expected to be on sale at the beginning of next year, comes with. I mean, if it came with a 39 kilowatt hour pack, which is what they're putting in the Kona and the Niro, that would kind of make sense, as they've got an order in for those, and for a car that the size of the Soul EV. Well, you know, we know how efficient they are as well. a 39 kilowatt hour pack would take you a long way. I'll put a link to that article in the show notes. Well, a quick check of the plug-in sales scorecard on Inside EVs, always worthwhile, because you always learn something new. And I've been flicking around there to have a little look at what's going on with sales. Like I say, to try and save you time, to try and pick out the deal. I know you're busy. I just try and pick out the things that you need to know. And a little look at the Jaguar I-Pace is interesting. It sold 140. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. That's not a lot. 140 units in August. That's a running total now of about 558. So I would expect September sales to start to ramp significantly. Well, Mark Kane says that additionally, it seems likely Jaguar is going to delay the launch of the I-Pace in other markets, like the US, as it tries to fulfill a mounting backlog of demand in Europe. Meanwhile, they haven't got to grips with delivering large numbers of the I-Pace, and yet we're still talking about what's coming next. We love to talk about what's coming next and speculate. Well, Fred over at Electrek says the Korea Times reported the Samsung Seed SDI supplier won the new contract from Jaguar, which is worth 5 gigawatt hours of production of the 2170 cells from its Hungarian factory per year. Samsung SDI, says the statement, fiercely competed with other battery makers, including LG Chem and Panasonic, to win a contract from the British car maker since last year. The company declined to confirm, saying we cannot offer information related to our customer companies. Well, Samsung's reportedly going to start supplying the new cells for Jaguar Land Rover's new electric vehicles from 2020. I'll put a link to the Electric article in the show notes. If that was for the 90 kilowatt hour pack in the I-Pace, it would make 55,000 of them. I mean, that's about the 5 gigawatt hours per year order that they've put in. Well, maybe say that the pack is bigger and that the 90 kilowatt hours, which is quoted, is usable. Well, maybe that's 50,000 cars that could be used to produce. That's a large proportion of Jaguar sales. It's even a pretty good proportion of Jaguar Land Rover sales, the parent company. Now, the other option being that they use that 5 gigawatt hours of battery supply from 2020 for their plug-ins. We know that there's new emissions rules here in Europe, and that plug-ins are going to be a way for those big, I'll say SUVs, but 4x4s, like the Range Rovers, to have plugs and to dramatically reduce their emissions. So the packs in those 10, maybe 15, maybe at the most 20 kilowatt hours is going to give you really good 30-mile range, maybe up to 50-mile range if they're more efficient. I mean, they're big cars to lug around and a couple of tons of metal. But anyway, smaller batteries on the plug-ins, and therefore maybe they would go into 100,000 cars. All good things to speculate about. And you know what? It's a firm order for batteries in cars in 2020 in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of cars, depending on how they use that capacity. So it's just amazing news. It's incredible news that Jaguar seem ahead of the pack in terms of the non-Teslas, and they're trying to extend that. Well, electric and other ultra-low emission cars and vans and taxis could be getting special green number plates to boost awareness and increase the use of environmentally clean driving here in the UK. Green plates are already used in Norway, Canada and China on green vehicles, including electric and hydrogen cars, making them both distinct and visible to other road users. According to a report in the UK's Guardian, the plans are contained in a new UK government consultation announced yesterday on Sunday that seeks the views on the design of what they should look like, the new green plates, and opinions on which cars and other vehicles they could be fitted on. The consultation comes as the Prime Minister here in Great Britain, Theresa May, prepares to address the first ever Zero Emission Summit in Birmingham. Birmingham in the UK. I don't know why the first one was with an American accent. And also Buckinghamshire this week, which will bring together nations from across the globe to pledge collective action towards zero emission journeys. Again, I'll put a link to that article in the show notes. My 2 cents worth, cars that should have green plates are cars that should have a plug. So yes, they can have an engine, in my humble opinion. Green plates should go on pure BEVs and plug-in cars. Hybrids and e-power cars, they don't count because they don't move unless you put fossil fuels inside them. So although it's clever, the technology that Toyota use, and Toyota having loads of success with their hybrids, and they are the leader, you would argue, in soft hybrid cars, they're not green. I mean, they save some fuel economy, they do a bit of regen braking, a tiny amount, but unless you live at the top of a very, very big hill and you only drive down that hill once, you've still got to put fuel in to get to the top of the hill. Do you know what I mean? To get home again. So, although it's clever technology, I don't think of them as electric cars. It's clever hybrid stuff, and fair play to them. But they shouldn't have green plates. I'm sure they'll lobby very hard that they should be included in being seen as low emission cars, but they're not, because they don't move forwards until you put fossil fuels inside them. The same going for e-power cars, by the way, which is kind of Nissan's term, e-power. That's where they're very popular, not so much in Europe or North America, but in Asia, very popular. And the e-power cars are using a combustion engine as a generator. So you've got to so they've got a battery, a small battery, there's like a 1 or 2 kilowatt hour battery in the e-power cars, and the generator charges the battery turns the wheel, so you're always driving on electric power, but that power, there's no plug on the car. So you have to put fossil fuels inside, and yet they are still, because of a loophole, still classed as an EV because they run on electric. Like I say, the battery drives the wheel, so they are an EV. Well, they're not really, are they? But still. Anyway, green plates only on cars with plugs, please. Maybe you agree. Maybe you disagree. I like it when people disagree. Then let me know in the comments on YouTube and Facebook, and you can email hello@evnewsdaily.com. Whilst I'm mentioning feedback, why don't you chip in with this week's question of the week, being posed by the team at myev.com. Keep your comments coming in on email and YouTube. There's the question this week. Where do you go for information when considering buying an EV or researching a specific make and model? Is there one trusted source you use for information? Or do you have to go through all the news sites like Inside EVs, the YouTube vlogs like Fully Charged, and even the automakers' official website pages? And what about when you want to know about things like charging or incentives? Where do you find out your information? Let us know in the comments. A heartfelt thank you, as always, to the 74 patrons of this podcast whose sheer generosity, and I value it very, very much, by the way, means I get to make this show. And if you want to contribute as well, the tiers start anything from $5, and you don't have to have a look at that. It's not compulsory by any means at all, but it's there at patreon.com/evnewsdaily. There's 230 previous episodes to listen to for free. They will always be free, and they're on iTunes and all the usual podcast places and YouTube. And if you want to catch up on the socials, just search EV News Daily. You'll find me in all those places. Have a wonderful day. I'll catch you tomorrow.